Hi, this is Annie Grace, and I am answering readers' questions. And today I have a question that is somewhat intense, but I thought really worth giving my best shot at kind of what I can give to this question. Of course, I am not a therapist. I am not a doctor. So we all need to be very clear on that before I sort of dig in. So this is a question from Diane. Diane writes in, she says, "Hi, Annie, I am listening to your book via Audible. I'm on chapter 15. I love it and it all makes sense and is ever inspiring and changing my thought process. I especially like the story about your father and how with his strong, pliable mind, he decided to stop drinking all at once. Looking back, I can see that I found my relief in stress, discouragement, and a feeling of being no good due to an extremely abusive childhood. This ingrained subconscious mind of mine is still having the feeling of being not good enough, despite over 40 years of counseling, medications, rehabs, etc. I get that wine has created horrible consequences for me and my family, especially my son, who's now 25. However, I don't know how to manage the tapes in my brain from the abuse and being an extremely sensitive person. If I were deceived, especially by a client or my sisters, I reach for the wine to relieve the anger and the hurt feelings. These responses and reactions have developed over a lifetime. I'm now 66. AA for 25 years did nothing but get me into trouble with like minds, more hurts, more lies, more gossip. Can you address in a podcast how to deal with and come to terms with changing the way that one reacts automatically by rewiring our ingrained and learned bad feelings about oneself, the subconscious mind, and not having to squelch the hurt, pain, or anger by using alcohol? What do you suggest?" Thank you so much for all of your inspiring information. So this is such an important question. And first of all, I just want to say that I'm so sorry to hear this. I know that this is a lot of people's stories. You know, a lot of times alcohol comes in, especially as young children, and that first drink, it's like it makes everything okay. It makes everything sort of right with the world, and you feel suddenly like, oh my gosh, things are okay, and it can become so quickly addictive because it is actually more addictive to the brain when the brain is in pain. And so if you have pain from suffering from abuse as a young child, that becomes more and more addictive. So this is not it's a tragic story, very much so. And I'm so sorry you've had to deal with this in your life, but I also want you to know that it's not a unique story, that there are so many people who have gone through similar, just horrific and intense circumstances. And I also want you to know that there is absolutely hope. Also, I want you to know that that feeling of not being good enough, it's pretty universal. And so I'm not saying that you maybe feel it more intensely because of your circumstances or your situations historically, but I also want you to let yourself off the hook a little bit to understand that human beings, we feel not good enough. A lot of times, most of the time at our core, there's something inside of us that has this feeling of not being good enough. And it's interesting because we weren't born that way. We come out and we feel fine. I mean, my 4-year-old daughter, she's incredibly confident. She is on top of the world. She feels really, great, but things happen to all of us over time. And some of them are horrific and tragic. And some of them, by external circumstances, we would look at it and be like, well, that wasn't that big of a deal. But for the individual feeling it, it creates this feeling of not feeling good enough. And so just know that you're not alone in that pain, and that pain is very, very universal, and I really understand it. So the first thing I kind of want to talk about is a little bit of the difference between coaching, at least coaching through This Naked Mind Institute and by This Naked Mind certified coaches, specifically coaching in the Path, which is our signature year-long program. A year sounds like a lot, but some of these things need to be really dealt with over time. And I will say that in the Path, we spend like the first 3 to 4 months focused on alcohol, but then we spend the last part of the year, so the majority of it, focused on these types of issues, focused on the repetitive thoughts in our brain that are causing us pain now in the present. And I call that, we drink for 3 reasons. We drink for the reason of substance, like what it is, like alcohol, all the beliefs that we have about alcohol, that it relaxes us, that it helps us have a good time, that it's fun, that it helps us loosen up. Then we drink also for beliefs we have around society, that we're not going to fit in, that we will be kind of cast out, that we won't even, some of our relationships are based on alcohol and we might lose those relationships. And then we actually drink for a third level, which is the deepest level, which is the level of self. And those are the reasons that I was talking about, those universal reasons that we're not good enough, that we aren't strong enough, that something happened and we're somehow broken. And those reasons are the ones that we really deal with. And we deal with them in a very different way than therapy. So therapy is often going back into the past and really trying to look at the past. And coaching, especially coaching with this naked mind, is specifically working on the thoughts you are having in the present, the thoughts you are having today about your past, and going through a technique we call the ACT technique to unwind those thoughts about today. So it's a very, very different approach. And whether it's me with this Naked Mind certified coaches or another place, there's a lot of places that you can get really effective coaching, which I think can be sometimes when you've done therapy for years, can be a little bit of the missing piece. And coaching, again, it's very tactical. It really focuses on changing those thoughts in the moment and practicing those thoughts. Now, there's a lot of pitfalls that people fall into when they think about this, because they're like, well, if it was just so easy to change my thoughts, I would have done that a long time ago. One of the main pitfalls, though, is that we have a thought, maybe we have a thought that I'm not good enough. And we immediately say, okay, well, if I'm going to change that thought, I better change that thought. And so we walk around trying to tell ourselves that we are good enough and trying to get ourselves to believe it and try to force that thought in. We might even put up sticky notes. I'm wonderful. I am great. I am a success. I'm beautiful, whatever, all over, trying to really get ourselves to understand we are good enough and make that true for us. The problem is that when our brain doesn't believe that new thought, we actually just create more chaos. We create what's called neurotoxicity, according to Dr. Caroline Leaf. She's a neuroscientist out of South Africa. And it can be really, really difficult, if not impossible, to force new thoughts in. So what coaching does is it does not do that. It identifies the thoughts that are causing pain and then introduces thoughts that you actually believe that are just fractionally less painful than the previous thought, right? So if you have a thought that says, I'm not good enough, maybe you're introducing and practicing for this week a thought of one area in your life where you do feel honestly good enough, where you do feel some sort of empowerment, and we practice that and then we expand from there. And so we take just a very incremental step on the path, and the results can be absolutely astounding and absolutely amazing. But with all of this type of work, the thing that we have to understand is the brain is incredible. Even at 66 years old, your brain is phenomenal. It is incredible. It is amazing, and it can change. The problem is if you don't have the right method to change, you can be in a lot of pain and actually have results that aren't bringing you any closer to where you want to be. Now, I want to give you an analogy to describe how the brain changes. Imagine that you have this new thought, right? And it's a new thought that you can believe. So maybe let's just give an example. So maybe you have the thought that I'm not good enough. And maybe you have this new thought that you're going to practice to give yourself a little bit of a feeling that you are good enough, which is going to be, but I am really good enough at cooking because, gosh darn it, I make the best chicken casserole, whatever that thought is. And you're going to practice that. And you're going to practice that feeling of feeling really good enough at something. And then we're going to expand from there. So if you've always had these thoughts, well, as soon as you feel like, well, I'm really good at cooking, you have a chaser thought from the I'm not good enough part of your brain that says, oh, but you're not as good as your sister. Oh, but you're not as good as so-and-so. Oh, but they liked her food better, whatever the case is, right? Like I'm just making all of this up. But this new thought, pretend this new thought that you want to practice, that you want to get good at, that you want to allow to give you a feeling of being good enough is like a Ferrari. The problem is that you're driving that Ferrari on a dirt road. So it's hard at first. There's obstacles and you have to intentionally, I always like to say intentionality to the point of it being awkward, intentionally practice that new way of thinking, that new way of being. But eventually, because of how the brain works, you create patterns inside your brain for that new thought. So you literally create a beautiful paved road for that new Ferrari thought to drive down effortlessly without friction. And then that new thought becomes habit, it becomes routine, and then you build upon that from there. Everything we do at This Naked Mind is about creating positive emotion, because positive emotion, according to the most recent scientific research, more than anything else, is the key to lasting change. You can change easier, faster, and over the long term in a much more effective way with positive emotion than literally anything else. And so everything we do is to just create incrementally more positive emotion. So I don't have a lot of answers for you, although to say I want you to have hope. There is a way. Your brain is completely plastic. It is able to change. It's called neuroplasticity. You can mold it as if it's Play-Doh, as if it's clay, and you can get the results that you want in your life and really make it so that you are not stuck at that level of self, those beliefs about self, where, you're going to read the book all the way through and you're going to be like, I don't even want alcohol. All the substance related beliefs, what alcohol does for me, they don't even matter anymore. It's not even there. All the society related beliefs, I can handle all that. I get it. But you're still possibly going to be reaching for a drink whenever you have those deep, subconscious, self-related beliefs that sound a lot like I'm not good enough. And there are proven tools and tactics to get you out of that. But it does take a lot more than a podcast episode. And so if you're curious about that, certainly reach out. And best of luck. Know that you're not alone and know that there is hope. No matter what age you are, there's absolutely hope. And I wish you the absolute best.